Hello and welcome to Cryptid by State Arizona. As many of you are aware, or probably figured, today we are continuing our journey of the Cryptid by State series, where we'll look at the cryptids that are said to roam about Arizona. A few weeks ago I asked for you to vote for which state you wanted to see next due to a four-way tie, and you showed a lot of support for this state. I must admit that I was a little concerned with this video, since outside of the state's most famous cryptid, skinwalkers, information about others was hard to come by. I really had to dig deep and leave no stone unturned in order to provide you with a fairly complete list. Although, I must say, once the dust settled, cryptids started appearing from the shadows, just waiting for their stories to be told. So, without dragging this out, let's continue our very cross-country road trip that we've been on, since we are heading from our last location of Michigan and going back west to Arizona. Arizona has a very diverse history and also has quite a few unique parts of their story that makes this state extremely interesting. Starting off, the state was originally part of New Mexico, that were lands originally owned by Mexico. These areas were passed into the hands of the United States after the Mexican-American War in 1848, and then later other portions were bought in the Gadsden Purchase of 1853. It officially became a state on February 14, 1912, making Valentine's Day a pretty important day for the area. In becoming part of the United States, it was the 48th to do so. Throughout the state's history, Native Americans have called the area home, and in fact a settlement from the Arabi people, who were part of the Hopi tribe, was found that dated back to 1150 AD and is considered the oldest one in the United States. To this day, Arizona has devoted the most amount of its land to Native American reservations, with a quarter of the state being designated as such. The name for the state is up for debate, as some believe it came from the Native American word Elizon or Elishonak, which translates to place of little spring. Yet, others argue that the name was actually based on Basque missionaries that were set up in the area. In this variation, the name Arizona means the good oak tree. What makes this version of this story more prominent is that the Basque people lived between Spain and France, and theirs is one of the oldest languages on the planet. Not only this, but the word Arizona is frequently tied to any settlements that the Basque people had, and the name is found in Central and South America as well. Something that isn't debated is the state's nickname, which is the Grand Canyon State, which is for obvious reasons. Something that I found very interesting is that Arizona is considered the 6th largest state, while being the 14th most populated area. However, the population didn't really surge until after World War II, when refrigeration and air conditioning became more prominent in people's lives. With temperatures reaching over 100 degrees for most of the year, this fact, while strange, makes a lot of sense. As usual, I like to give information about each state's flag, since I really find it interesting, and I have seen in the comments that many of you do as well. Arizona has a very beautiful and unique flag that, according to the story, was designed by Colonel Charles W. Harris in 1910 for the purpose of the Arizona Rifle Team to showcase their state when competing in the national matches, which were being held in Ohio. Before this time, Arizona didn't have a flag. As you can see, the flag is a copper star with 13 rays of red and gold colors, and the bottom portion is simply all blue. The number of rays represent the original 13 colonies, with the red and gold colors standing for two things: the beautiful scenery, and it represents the colors from the Spanish flag that Francisco Vázquez de Coronado had when he visited the area in 1540. The copper-colored star stands for the prominent copper mines in the state, and the blue is said to be symbolic for the Colorado River. Something that is really interesting is that according to the state's Executive Order 66-6 for rules in displaying the flag, it says the flag represents a living state and is in fact considered a living thing. So without dragging this out any longer, let's get into the cryptids. While looking for cryptids in Arizona, one thing became very clear. This state has quite a few that are the flying variety. In fact, about over 50% of the list consists of these type of creatures. The first one that I would like to talk about is the cryptid known as the yo-yo. There isn't a lot of information about this one, but many describe it as basically being a version of the Mothman, but it has some peculiar habits. This creature has been spotted in Springerville, Nogales, and St. John's. It is said to be 6 to 7 feet tall, have gray or black skin, large wings, red eyes, and long claws. Much like the Mothman from West Virginia, there haven't been any reports of it attacking anyone. In most sightings, it is said to make meals out of roadkill, which sounds really similar to another Arizona cryptid I'll talk about later briefly, called the Bobo. According to legends, this cryptid has a long history with the native Hopi tribe, where at one point they felt the need to banish it through rituals. Whether this is true or not is undetermined, but on January 1st of 2017, a man named Richard Christensen posted an image he caught in Phoenix that may have been this elusive creature. Many claim that what he took a picture of was a palm tree, but there are a few things about that explanation that don't add up for me. The next cryptid is a really strange situation that I didn't even plan on. Thunderbirds are quite prominent in the mysterious history of Arizona, but little did I know this went a step farther. First, Thunderbirds have been spotted all over the world, and they are basically giant birds that are powerful enough to lift a human into the air, and are said to be fairly aggressive. In Native American lore, these creatures take on more of a supernatural presence, with abilities such as affecting the weather. They are able to project lightning bolts, and are involved in heroic lore. Today, many people see them, as mentioned, as a giant bird, or even in some retellings as a form of pterosaur that time forgot. Here is the interesting thing. Even when I was compiling my list, I wrote down about the photograph I saw years ago of a pterodactyl-like creature nailed to a barn, and a few cowboys were standing below it. When I went to look up this photo, I found out that this instance is actually a form of the Mandela effect. Apparently a lot of people remember this photo vividly, but no one can find it, and even stranger, there are no records of it existing. I can honestly say I never knew this memory of mine was actually a mystery. The story behind the photograph remains, however. According to the story, on April of 1890, 2 to 3 cowboys from Tombstone chased down and killed a giant bird that had leathery skin with no feathers, its feet had long talons, and its head was that of an alligator. It sure sounded a lot like a pterodon to me. Now the story gets stranger when in 1930, during a celebration in the area, a man stepped forward claiming to be one of those cowboys. However, he claimed the story about the event was wrong, and that the creature was right, but they never were able to kill it. He claimed the horses became too startled to move, and the bird simply flew away. I normally don't like to go into these kind of stories with my Cryptid by State videos, but I couldn't pass up talking about something as mysterious as this, let alone something really famous involving Arizona. The next cryptids I am going to lump together, since they seem very similar. If I am wrong in doing so, please let me know. This would be the Arizona version of the Aswang and a creature known as the Alatiel. The Alatiel is a giant-sized bat that many claim lives in the lava tubes of Humphreys Peak, which is located in Flagstaff. There was even a television program on the Discovery Channel where Bill Brock investigated the area trying to find this cryptid. In looking this one up, I did find that quite a few people claimed that it was made up for the television show. Sadly, this does happen frequently, but it is worth noting that cryptozoologist Ivan T. Sanderson did record an encounter with a similar creature while he was exploring the rainforest of Cameroon. In this story, the creature did try to attack Ivan and his party, but it seemed more defensive. While this has nothing to do with Arizona, it does show that something like a giant bat could exist. Now, with the Aswang, it is very similar, but it has a few distinct differences. This creature is also bat-like, but it is said to be able to change its form. In many stories, it is said to walk around everyone else, disguised as a human, but at night, it takes the form of a horrific creature. Although it can look human, it has been said to be able to change into a dog, cat, horse, or anything really. Much like a mouse, it can manipulate its body to fit into very narrow and tight places, making it able to hide just about anywhere. I have an issue with this creature being called an Aswang, since outside of its ability to transform and its love of human flesh, nothing else really matches up. Typically the Aswang from the Philippines, where the cryptid story started, can act in different ways, but normally it is said to separate its body at the waist and fly about with its upper half looking for a victim. It also is known to use its long tongue to drink blood or suck out organs. With the one in Arizona, which is said to be seen around the Apache Death Caves near Two Guns, it doesn't do any of that. This version is said to have gray skin, milky eyes, sharp teeth, long claws, and is very skinny. It uses its long claws to disembowel victims, and does have the Aswang characteristic for making a habit of stealing fetuses and young children. Many pregnant cows in the area have been found dead with the unborn calves removed. What is interesting is that much like the flying monkeys from California known as rebobs, there are claims that the Aswangs were created by labs and accidentally released or simply escaped. Finally, we are moving on to more terrestrial forms of cryptids found in the state. Probably the most famous would be what is simply called reptoids or reptilians. I am hesitant with this one since many, including myself, view this creature more in lines with aliens than cryptids. Most stories involving these beings are said to come from the aptly named Superstition Mountains near Phoenix. Conspiracy theorists have long held this area as being home to an underground military base, which is said to house these beings. In reading over many of the accounts, the reptoids are responsible for people passing out, only to wake up hours later with no recollection of what happened to them. Yet in other stories, these beings are said to kidnap people who unwarily enter the area. In one strange story, 3 bike riders in the Sonoran Desert stopped to take a break from their ride. At that moment, they noticed a 6-foot-tall lizard-like creature walking across the path. They said it had black eyes with a gold-colored stripe in the center, its skin was scaly and green with red patches, and it didn't have a nose, but it did have 2 slits for nostrils. Once it noticed the men, it stood there for a while, and finally it raised one hand that had long claws on it, and it began to chatter its teeth and hiss. Luckily, it didn't attack, but rather ran away into the desert. The men believed it was actually observing them the whole time, even after it vanished from sight. Moving from the lizard men, I wanted to talk about the Goatman. Around the areas of Parker and Tempe, there have been sightings of a half-man, half-goat. Although it should be noted in some cases the head of the creature is still that of a goat. According to the stories, this creature can be both bad and good depending on the encounter, but all states that you should never run from one of them. In one report, 2 boys encountered this cryptid, and once they realized what it was, they quickly got away, and nothing bad happened to them. Yet, in another instance, a group of teenagers were sitting near a fire when they suddenly were visited by a 7-foot-tall Goatman, who managed to grab one of the kids. With this story, the kid that was grabbed was never seen again, and it is assumed, due to hearing him screaming, that the creature killed him. There isn't much to go on with this, but I did want to mention it. At the same time, I am curious if it wasn't actually a skinwalker. I do find it interesting how many cryptids in Arizona have the ability to change forms. As usual, I couldn't include every cryptid on this video, but I did want to mention a few of them briefly for posterity. I mentioned the Bobo previously, but I wanted to go into it a little bit more here. I am not sure if it is actually the same as the yo-yo or not, but the Bobo is said to make its home in the St. John's area. One big difference is that the Bobo has never been described as having wings of any sort. There is very little information about it other than it being small, skinny, hairless, and it tends to hang around old graveyards where it eats the bones of the deceased, and has been spotted making a meal of roadkill. A real peculiar thing about this cryptid is that it apparently can't be seen dead on, and can only be viewed from the corner of your eye. It sounds like a mix between the Native American Wendigo and the completely fictional Rake. Another cryptid worth mentioning is the canine version of the Chupacabra, which has been given the name Blue Dog. It has been spotted for quite some time all over Arizona, and descriptions vary widely on what it actually looks like. Some say it is rat-like, others say it is a small ape, while others describe it as the real reptilian Chupacabra. Moving on, no study into a state's cryptids would be complete without mentioning that this area has two distinctly different versions of Bigfoot living there as well. The first of which is the Mogollon monster, which makes its home in the Mogollon Rim. This Sasquatch is said to be 7 to 8 feet tall, very large, have reddish-brown hair, red eyes, and is fairly aggressive. In many of the stories, this creature will decapitate its prey before eating them. It has also been mentioned that these cryptids are responsible for killing a newlywed couple in the early 1900s. To go in the reverse of this, a very small Bigfoot called Schizomine is said to roam about the area of Mount Graham. I'm curious if any of my Arizona viewers know of any cryptids that I missed. I didn't include the skin fin from Lake Powell, but I am aware of it. The only thing that bothered me with these cryptids is that so many of them didn't have a lot of information to go into detail with. While this is troubling, it does add an air of mystery. Much like I was pondering the other day, you always hear stories of a peculiar creature and everyone says it kills its victims at sight. Yet, we always have stories about them, so someone had to have escaped. Then I thought, what if a creature exists that does do exactly that, and due to this fact, we have zero knowledge of it? Creepy thought, I know. If you haven't yet done so, do please consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this, and also it would greatly be appreciated if you could share my videos with someone you know who may be interested in this type of genre. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later!